I'm Ayesha Jalal, and welcome to this panel on citizen Cowasjee. When he was asked who he was, what he would always say, I'm a citizen of Pakistan. Because he firmly believed that the founder of Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah's vision of Pakistan, included all citizens of Pakistan, all Pakistanis, regardless of which minority or sect they belong to. Now, the ideal of citizenship that Ayesha Cowasjee talked about, spent much of his life articulating, was not confined narrowly to simply legal or civic rights of citizenship, but included the social and political rights of citizenship as well. And he spent really a lot of energy advocating and promoting these through his columns in Dawn over a stretch of time, which made him a household name in Pakistan. If you consider that he wrote from, the selection of his columns are available in what is called vintage Cowasjee, appropriately, and which is available for sale for those of you who want to be reminded of those unforgettable, some of them, columns that we've been reading for endless numbers of years. And really, he wrote from 1984 to 2011, and became, in a sense, a witness to history, and also a voice of our collective consciousness. So what motivated Ayesha Cowasjee? Why did he do what he did? What lessons can we take away from his life and work? And really, what is his legacy for Pakistan today? These issues and more will form the focus of our discussion with our three panelists today. On my right is Dr. Framji Minwalla, who is an assistant professor and chair of the Department of Social Sciences and Liberal Arts at the Institute of Business Administration in Karachi, where he teaches, amongst many things, creative things, film, courses on film, visual media, and communications. Welcome, Framji. On my left is, again, someone who's well known. He's been one of our anchors, moderators at this wonderful festival this year and also the previous year. Rafay, environmentalist lawyer, a columnist in his own right, who focuses on issues relating to water, energy, and of course urbanization, something that ties him to Cowasjee's preoccupations. And further to my left is Ayaz Amir, a renowned columnist who needs really no introduction to this audience. Welcome, Ayaz. So let me begin then by asking a question to all of you, really, and you can answer in your own ways. What made Ayesha Cowasjee possible? Was it the fact that he was born in privilege, a socially privileged position, or was it the fact that he was a minority and he could feel things that perhaps many of those who willy-nilly are in the majority community miss out? I'd like to begin with perhaps, whoever goes. Each one of you has a chance.
I think it had something to do with both. I think that the Parsi heritage in Karachi is particularly strong in many ways. My students were making a documentary about Parsi contributions to Karachi, and they asked to interview him, and their opening gambit was, well, what have Parsis done for Karachi? And he looked them straight in the eye and said, we built it. And in many ways, he inherited that not only from his grandfather, but from the many Parsis who in the early part of the 20th century really made significant contributions to the building of both institutions and structures and in Karachi. I think his position as a minority also helped him to understand the plight of minorities in Islamic country and to understand how the very laws that were governing us, the constitution that governed us, affected minorities in very specific and particular ways that perhaps the majority was not aware of. So I think it's a confluence of both things.
Why did he do what he did? Who knows? I want to share a story. This is back in the 90s. Uncle Ayesha had written a column on the corruption in the judiciary, and had been served legal notice contempt notice. And surprisingly, he pled the truth, which is probably the best defense to do in a defamation case. And lo and behold, the Supreme Court forgot about the case.
What was the truth?
He'd written that they were all corrupt. And they issued charges against him. And then it was a barroom law that a few years later, at a human rights meeting in Karachi, he bumped into Sayyid Zaman Siddiqui. And the former Chief Justice said, Cowasjee sahab, aapne bahut bura kiya. And he said, Sara tum jaisa bahut dekha. And this became sort of barroom lore and rumor. And my friend Faisal Naqvi, when he heard about it, asked Asma Jahangir if it was true, and it was reported true. And Faisal subsequently asked Uncle Ayesha whether this was true, and he said, yes, that's true. What's the point of all this money if you can't call a Sala to his face? But you see, so that is important. That is very important, because it gave him the ability to stand ground in a place where it's very difficult to do so. We've seen in the news how events can be manipulated and people can be manipulated, but it gave him very, very strong grounding. But that grounding is also important. It came from a very strong but very simple sense of what is right and wrong. Quite often I go around telling people that we've come to a stage where it's become necessary to state the obvious. Yeah, ye sahi cheez hai, ye kharab cheez hai, for God's sake.
Yes, but I mean, but people have decided in this atmosphere to keep mum. Ayesha refused to stay mum. And my question remains, was it because of privilege or because he was acutely aware or felt these things? Because he was a minority. Why do so many people who are privileged and are part of the majority not say anything? And I mean, that's really, you say it's both. You say, I mean, his personality. But really, Ayaz, what do you think?
See, there's no shortage of rich people in Karachi. There are parts of Karachi which are full of rich people. There's no shortage of rich people in Lahore or Islamabad. You stand on the Minwalla hills and you see all the wealth concentrated over there. But how many people all stand up like him? The Parsis are a very powerful community, small but powerful. In their own circles, everyone knows them, and they make a splash and everything. But how many Parsis have a national or an international reputation? That was only one person. So it wasn't because of his privileged background. That helped. I mean, when you have a private fortune, and a private fortune of to the extent which he has, that of course helps. But in Pakistan, people with enormous fortunes are the ones who keep the most quiet and the most mum. They don't do anything. So I think he was a contrary man. He was a bit of an eccentric. He was an unusual man, certainly. And there was a streak of that contrariness in him. Minu Bandara once told me that the first time he met him, this was on some ship, some boat or a yacht, and there was a party going on which the Cowasjees had hosted. And he was standing on the gangway, Ayesha Cowasjee. And Minu wanted to go to the facilities or wherever, and he said, may I? And arm like this, Ayesha said, no. That was the kind of person he is. The fortune helped, the contrariness helped. The Dawn column became enormously popular. Dawn in those days was known really as Yawn, rather than. And the only exciting bit in Dawn in those days used to be Ayesha's columns. This was, that acres and acres of Yawn, and then this and that gave him that national thing and people started to recognize. But he had a strong sense of what is right. He had a great love for Karachi. He used to go mad, at the building mafia, the encroachment mafia, and all those things. But he was unusual in the sense that he invested a great deal of time and patience and money, things that we talk about, but we don't do them. But he would go to court. He would put together lawyers. He would have engineers like Roland D'Souza. They would all get together and, go to court, stand over there, and so that was the unusual thing about it.
Two of the overarching themes that come out of these columns, and also as they've been published, selected articles that have appeared as vintage Cowasjee. The two themes that come out, one of course is his abiding focus on the founder of Pakistan and his vision of Pakistan. My own experience with Ayesha has been that after the sole spokesman, he would always give me insights related to Jinnah that he thought I may have missed out on. It was always a very lucrative exchange. But apart from Jinnah and his vision of Pakistan and its implications for citizenship, the other main theme was his abiding passion for Karachi, which I'm going to structure my questions to each of the panelists now based on these. I'd like to begin with Dr. Minwalla. Dr. Minwalla, you'll of course have heard, if our audience, some of our audiences have not, in this day and age we talk about, we say that the dominant cannot know itself. It is the margin that explicates the dominant, i.e. you cannot be part of the majority and really know yourself. It's how you treat your margins that really explain and define the majority. And in that regard, as a member of a minority, how well do you think Ayesha was able to, first of all, really expose the gap between the theory and the practice of citizenship in Pakistan? And do you think he really was successful?
I think partly to understand him is to understand his convictions about citizenship, and to understand that he firmly committed to Jinnah's vision of Pakistan, this vision of a secular state where everybody came together in honor of the state, to build the state, to develop the state, to make the state as strong as it possibly can, both its institutions and its people. And he subscribed to two complementary understandings of citizenship, I think. One is a citizenship where you are an active participant in politics, both in the thinking about and the drafting of laws that govern the polity, and also a sense of citizenship where citizenship is protected by laws. That as a citizen of a country, you are not a Shia, you are not a Sunni, you are not a Parsi, you are not a Christian, you are not a Hindu, you are a citizen, and that the laws of the country are designed to specifically protect your rights, your very human rights. One of the central themes in all of his columns is the protection of human rights and the implications of certain kinds of miscreant behavior on human beings and the ways in which those rights are abrogated. I think at the end of his life, his last column certainly attests to this, that he was very tired, and he felt that nothing he had said had actually helped. That there's a kind of exhaustion in the last column, and when you saw him in his final months, final year, he was very tired, and he was tired of actually saying repeatedly the same things. But at the same time, I think he made a huge difference. I think he really did make a difference in the country. I think part of the difference he made was that he opened up the public sphere in this country in a way that it hadn't been opened up, especially during the Zia years. He made it possible for certain kinds of debates and conversations to happen, especially in the media, post-Zia, when the media regulations, when the media opened up in a certain sense. So I think in certain ways he was very successful, perhaps not in the ways that he had hoped he would be in this, in ending corruption, declaring a secular state, removing all of the Islamic clauses in the Constitution. Those kinds of things which he railed about for so many years did not come to pass. But he did open up a space for debate in a way that debate had not happened. And I think that is hugely important for a country.
Thank you very much. Yes, nobody knows better than you the price for speaking the truth in this country. You're well aware of that. Tell me, do you think that Ayesha Cowasjee was able to get away with things because he was a member of the minority community rather than of the majority community? On issues of religion, on drink, on many aspects that would be frowned upon or would never be stated by a member of the majority community. Do you think there was something there that gave him a certain degree of space that is lacking for other citizens of this country?
No, I don't think so. It was, first of course, he had those views. everyone doesn't have those views. Everyone doesn't argue about such things the way he used to argue. The Seths or the tycoons of Karachi, though, they don't get into these things. They are not into civic issues or issues of minorities. They lead completely different, sequestrated lives, and they're interested in their own things. Now, he was, in that sense, a kind of an aberration, out of the norm into which he was born. As I said previously, he was well known. He was one Seth or tycoon who had friends amongst artists and journalists and trade unionists, and which is not normal of a person coming from his background. So what enabled him was his position, the views he had. I mean, he could have been a 10 times richer person, but if he did not have those ideas, then he would have just have been some other nondescript rich man, which he wasn't, but there was something else to him. It was a position, it was a newspaper, despite what I said about that newspaper, but that gave him that platform, which it gave him that national platform. His position enabled him to be friends with Ziaul Haq. He could speak to him. He was friends with Musharraf. He was not a great admirer of Pakistani democracy, the way it is, the way we see it here. And he would often make his views well known. He liked things like military bands. He was a great admirer of Churchill. His library, he had a huge library, a very big library with books and books on Churchill and other subjects. So all these things made him into an unusual.
But how did he reconcile his defense of human rights, citizenship rights, with his supposed endorsement of authoritarian regimes or individuals?
So it was, he was really, he was not a democratic judge. That he was.
But I mean, it depends what you mean by democracy. If by democracy you're talking about a simple reference to the people voting, then I would agree that he didn't. But when you look at his work, what he stands for, I mean, the endorsement of social rights of citizenship, political rights of citizenship, human rights, I mean, these are the goals of a democratic order. So I'm trying to understand how we can reconcile them.
There would be so many columns by him. You could put them together, in which he would begin by quoting Mr. Jinnah's speech of August the 11th. And he would not only go into this about that Hindus will cease to be Hindus, he would really say, the passage he would quote the most was, what is the first duty of a government? It is the establishment of law and order. He would begin by that. And he would see the fractured state of Pakistan and say, this is not law and order. So really what he was standing up for was the rule of law. And there can be a distinction between the rule of law and democracy, which sometimes so.
Well, and also, I mean, not all rule of law is authoritarian. I mean, I think that's important too. So I think there's more ambiguity there. Of course, I mean, one of the most exceptional things that we all honor and remember of Cowasjee is that he institutionalized public litigation against land mafias at great risk to himself. Not everybody again does this. And I mean, I remember meeting him in Karachi with this extraordinary long sort of security that he had to move around with, and I just couldn't believe how the poor man survived that. But Rafay, you've worked on similar issues, and this is something that has brought you close to Ayesha as well. And I'd like you to share some of your thoughts on the subject, what it was like to work with them.
I would wake up in the morning and read the Sunday newspaper, and the last paragraph, 1 or 2 times he written, and Rafay Alam will be prosecuting the case. That's how it would start. With a phone call equally early in the morning, Captain! He would call me Captain, and I would call him General. And depending on my behavior, I was sometimes a lieutenant, very occasionally I was a major. Most of my life I remained a captain. Later on, one of the many dogs he had was also called Captain. When I'd go to visit, it'd always be, we'd go for lunch. Captain, yeah? I was studying law about the time General started the prosecutions. I think it was Cowasjee versus Multi-Line Associates, 1990 MLD. You get into the references. And this was, I mean, there were a couple of things happening in the Pakistani judiciary, and our public interest litigation law was forming. And the first couple of questions in public interest law were, do you have the locus standi? Do you have the right to make this objection? You know, I don't like that building. Well, what? Why? So that legal gap had to be removed, so that if it is a question of public importance relating to fundamental rights, it doesn't matter how you are affected or where you are, you can go to court. Multi-Line Associates did that. They provided jurisprudence and it widened up public interest litigation in Pakistan. Many of the litigations actually came from a deep sense of civic responsibility and sense. And the General carried on with him a very long tradition of South Asian...
General meaning Zia?
No. There's only one General. There's only one General. General Cowasjee. The General had...
I think you're confusing categories here.
No. I'm very clear about these categories. And speaking about the intellectualization of democracy, he wasn't necessarily a very democratic man, he was a very practical man. He wasn't intellectualizing the exercise of democracy. But I do remember, didn't necessarily endorse Pervez Musharraf. I remember after meeting him, we spoke and he said, I don't understand why the man dyes his hair. That's a very important point. He'd take that, and I don't like the fact that he dyes his hair. Otherwise he's all right, but he dyes his hair. But it carried on a very long sort of... we have to understand that cities in South Asia have been the exception and not the norm. We've had fantastic cities in South Asia. By and large, it's been a rural society. And the development of cities and the dekbhal of cities has always been traditionally something that citizens themselves have done through waqfs or through charities. It's been, not just in South Asia, I'd say throughout the world, it's been citizens who keep cities. Marcus Agrippa gave Rome its fountains, for example. And we don't have those civic-minded people anymore. We've lost that in our urbanization, so to speak. But General carried a very long tradition of that, and all of the litigation was very much, look, this is the law, you can't do this. It wasn't about you're going to make money.
But let me ask
There was
you,
always money behind
I
these
get
things.
your point, but I mean, the point here is that when we think of Ayesha as somebody who fought land mafias, took a stance on urban issues, very strong, at great risk to himself. And I agree with you that he was a practical man, but to imply that he was legalistic about these matters also.
No.
And I think that's what he wasn't.
That's what he wasn't.
And could you just explain a little bit more?
Well, the clarity of the articles, you see something like the Constitution, or understanding how Article 2A and the Objectives Resolution plays into the understanding of how our federation, these are technical things for which you can spend years in university. But at the end of the day, in each of us, they should be translated into simple sentences and simple understandings. And I think in his columns, he would be able to take that. He'd take this abstract notion of the Constitution and your rights and say, this is what it means. It means it in this many words, and it's just that complicated. It's just that simple. So even in the legal cases, you'll notice in the articles writing about the land mafia was never referred to. It wasn't this party or that party. It was always the rule of law. So, I mean, I'd hesitate to say he took on land mafias, because that sort of assumes that he had a target in mind. But it was always the establishment of the rule of law and what's right, and a very, very keen sense of two things, the environment and the rights of animals as well. Very, very keen sense.
The other thing that we have to account for is philanthropic activities.
Yes.
And I just wonder whether, I mean, when we consider all that he did in terms of public litigation, but what about the philanthropic activities? And I mean, to what extent was he able to highlight the role that the Parsi community frankly has played? And I think perhaps is not recognized adequately in this country. Could you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, I think, the Cowasjee Foundation has done just some incredible work, especially in Karachi. And the focus of the Cowasjee Foundation has been primarily education. Education is a theme that recurs in his columns. And the work that the Cowasjee Foundation has done in relation to building schools, establishing schools, training teachers, putting those teachers in place, specifically schools for the underprivileged, it's been kind of remarkable. It's been fighting a battle in Karachi about a kind of secular education that is fast losing ground, or has been losing ground. They have, there are, in addition to the building of schools, the setting up of scholarships for students going abroad to study who do not have the funds to study, both at the undergraduate and the graduate level. There has been a lot of funding from the Cowasjee Foundation, specifically in that regard. There has been, the Cowasjee Foundation has done work with the TCF schools, a considerable amount of work there, but also in terms of restoration projects, the preservation projects in Karachi. If you actually go to his house, one of the really remarkable things about his house is that it is littered with stuff that he found and picked up from buildings that were being broken down. So there are plaques, there are statues, there are bits and pieces of marble that he decided were worth preserving. There are pieces of his ships before they were salvaged. So in a sense, he was also, his sense of preservation, of preserving a way of life and a vision and ideal of Pakistan manifests itself through both the restoration projects and the funding, the money that the Cowasjee Foundation really does give for education, the development of educational institutions in Karachi specifically. And I think, you know, that is the part of his legacy that I don't think many people really know about. And this really was a brainchild of his, and his force, his sort of weight on the foundation helped to develop that, a set of ideals about how philanthropy should and could be done, and how philanthropy could actually help develop and help set a foundation for the ideals the ideals in which he believed, essentially.
That's very important. But I mean, Citizen Cowasjee has left us with an extraordinarily sort of rich legacy. Once which is the philanthropic activities you've talked about, his institutionalized education, and you know his columns in Dawn. But how should we? I mean, what are the other constitutive elements? And one of the things that comes to my mind is that he reminds you constantly that citizenship is not just a right; it's a duty, it's a responsibility. And he performed that responsibility through his philanthropic activities, through his columns in Dawn, in every which way that he could. But what are some of the other constitutive elements, and how should we in Pakistan be honoring this legacy of Citizen Cowasjee?
May I just get back to the building thing?
Of course, please.
See, I think one has to do justice to his column. He made that, or it became an institution of Karachi. The column was influential, and everyone in Karachi read it. So if he was talking about trees being cut, or a building being built like this, or the road being encroached, it would figure in his column. So because of the column, it would already have become a public issue. That is what he managed to create. Now just note the contrast with Lahore today. The government is thinking of demolishing a part of the Lady Willington Hospital. Now, had this been Karachi, and had Ardeshir been alive, they would have been, you know, such a noise about it. But you see Lahore, and it's relatively quiet. There are people who've gone to court. But the way this should have become a public issue, a hospital being demolished for any reason, but it's not a public issue. The way the construction or the expansion of the canal has taken place, the canal, this would have been an issue, I mean, in Karachi, with
taken suo motu notice of by the Supreme Court on a letter written by Ayesha Cowasjee in his column called He Hears the Trees.
That case, I want to just respond to that. That case is it's an example of civil society in Lahore forming, an unlikely bunch of people doing an unlikely thing. And it learned from it, it was based on the types of civic engagement and responsibility of the Ayesha Cowasjee column. Very much so. That was the guiding spirit of it. And he was instrumental in us going to the Supreme Court, having the Supreme Court Chief Justice listen. But I just want to add that the Supreme Court decided 10 things about the canal. Okay, it said that a limited amount of the canal, not all 14 kilometers, but half of it will be widened. That the canal will be protected by law as a heritage site. And that the corners, the intersections will be remodeled so that they're actually easier to, and so on and so forth. What the government's done is that it's widened the 7.5 kilometers, and on paper it's actually passed a law declaring the park a heritage park. Now what we see quite often is the road, but we don't understand that a law has been made. It's the first time in the history of Pakistan a park has been declared by law. It's the first heritage park in the history of Pakistan. There's an advisory committee that sits over the park that has civil society participation in it. I know I'm involved in it. That was part of the idea. But I find that when we turn around, when I turn around after all this effort, nobody cares anymore. And this is that point, that the space has grown again. There's not that constant 6 a.m. in the morning phone call, Rafay, why aren't you doing this?
You can also mention the Dungi ground.
Yes. You know, with Dungi ground, I won't take any names, but first lawyers didn't want to do it, and then the people around, some of the people around the Dungi ground didn't want to do it. Shehri from Karachi was the main petitioner, and that's when they stepped into the fore. That's when people in Lahore actually took on the Dungi ground case and took it to the High Court.
Yeah, I wanted to actually go back to something. So I wouldn't like people to leave this room thinking that Uncle Ayesha was an apologist for military dictatorships or a supporter of military dictatorships. He really wasn't. I think he found democracy particularly messy, especially the very process of voting. I think he understood that Pakistan's institutions were not strong enough to sustain a democracy, and our population not educated enough to vote in informed ways, or perhaps not even free enough to vote in informed ways. And I think that is partly what his suspicion about democratic processes were. But I really don't think he was an apologist of any of the only perhaps general he appreciated was Ayub, and I had an argument with him about this at one lunch one day, where he really sort of dismissed me, which was not uncommon. But you know, he would look at you and you wouldn't know whether he was about to smile at you or growl at you. But I don't think he was ever an apologist. I mean, in one of his columns, and I have the collection here, written in 1992, so we didn't have Musharraf yet. So he labels Ayub the secularist, sensible and practical, Bhutto the bully, cowardly and weak, Zia the zealot, the classic third world bigoted dictator, and Nawaz the nervous, weak and short-sighted. So it's not as if he actually... Not as if he actually ascribed to any of our politicians. I think he believed that our politicians were fundamentally unimaginative and corrupt and uncreative and not thinkers, not able to do the things that needed to be done.
Let me sort of say one thing about this democracy and his position on democracy. I mean, if you think of democracy as a panacea for all ills, then yes, I would agree that Ayesha was opposed to it. But if democracy is seen for what it is, which is that it is conflict, and most societies that are democratic spend their time creating institutions trying to moderate that conflict. That is what democracy is. To think that democracy will end conflict is the great illusion. I don't think he had that illusion. But if you really, so in that sense, it's because people presented democracy repeatedly as a slogan, as for rhetorical purposes, he opposed that. Because he realized the depths to which how complicated the matter was. There was corruption, nobody denies that. So I really wonder whether we need to complicate the view of democracy that you're saying that he didn't approve of. And I wonder whether you want to add to that.
Certainly he was no apologist of it, and I think that's absolutely the wrong word to use about it. But when I mentioned that portion of Mr. Jinnah's speech which he would quote over and over again, he admired the paternalism of Mr. Jinnah and the paternalism of other military figures. So there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, many of us do. We've gone through such a black and white period in Pakistan that when my generation was young, we used to think that the solution to all of Pakistan's ills is elections and democracy. We've grown wiser. as we've grown up and as we've progressed. So.
Well, I mean, that had to be the first battle. Democracy is essential but insufficient. You need to strengthen democracy and the institutions as well. And as we talk about citizen Cowasjee and his legacy, I wonder, again, to come back, as we remember the constitutive elements of that legacy and how we should in Pakistan be honoring it. For me, certainly, it is to hope and foresee a citizen that is conscious, active, and engaged, and not afraid to speak up. I think that's what Cowasjee leaves us behind.
No, but I think that's the key word, engaged. I mean, it is, if there is a lesson or a legacy that leaves behind, that a person should be engaged. He should be up and about. He shouldn't only pontificate in the comfort and security of his home, but he should get out, and he would get out in all the court cases, which really meant a lot of effort and going over there and calling Rafay in the morning and calling so many other people in the morning and lawyers all over. I mean, if there was an early morning telephone caller across Pakistan, it was Ayesha.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I don't know about you, Khan, but I do know that the general appreciated was General Atiq Rahman for certain. What a gentleman General Atiq Rahman was, and what a friendship they had. Fauj ka by and large thoda bahut mazak udta tha. I remember when I was an undergraduate in London, the general had flown through, he was coming back from the US, and I had spent 10 days in London. He called me, Captain, suit pehan ke aao. Suit tie pehan ke chale gaye. And you see, it was always an adventure. The general would take you on adventures. Gari mein baitho and you were gone, and you would meet the most interesting people. We went to the High Commission in London, and the High Commissioner at the time, who will remain unnamed, but we went and greeted him. The rule is you can go and see your High Commissioner. If you're Pakistani, just have to show your passport, you can go in. But naturally, we were received with some pomp. And the general turned to me and said, this is Rafay Alam, he's a captain of the army. Musharraf is sent in for my personal security. This was very frequent. Ek dafa Sean Circle ban raha tha Karachi mein, next to Ayaz. The problem was it didn't have a right turn or something, and we went to Nest Park. We'd gone to do something else, but on the way down on the lift, he just stopped. He said, "Ye Nest Park ka daftar." We walked in. Barged a door open where there were some engineers on a table looking over a model. He says, "Hello," they knew him. And this is Rafay Alam, he's an urban design student from Copenhagen. Gone to meet some very senior people in Karachi. All these IG this, retired IG that, retired chief secretary this, and I tool in with a suit. And the general sits down and he introduces me. This is Rafay Alam. He's a police specialist from Scotland Yard. And he's just come back from Japan. What I want, the sense of humor was epic. The High Commissioner, I mean, when they saw Pakistan Fauj, Musharraf, Haath Milaya, the number 2 took me into another room. Ki bataya kish division se hain. You play all of it, it's good fun. But the sense of humor, I mean, you said he had a very low tolerance for Bakwas. You could see through it very, very.
And he couldn't suffer fools either.
Suffer fools in a second, within a second. So
he was naughty and a bit of a prankster, but I want to bring in Dr. Minwalla on the legacy and the
yeah. I mean, at the end of where the descriptions of our various politicians comes at the beginning of a column that he wrote in 1992, specifically about the inclusion of the column on our Shanakhti cards that include religion or religious denomination. And at the end of that column, he writes this. He says, "Obscurantism must be resisted at every step. Those who can write must write. Those who can rant and rave must rant and rave. Those who can stage demonstrations and hunger strikes, even if they be but of 12 hours duration, must so do. Those in the assembly, such as Sardar Asif and Anwar Saifullah, though they be part of this government, must object. The champion walkers out, the opposition, must not walk out, but stay in the house and have their dissent recorded." And I think that was part of his legacy, is that we should record our dissent. We should not keep silent. And especially in the context of a minority standing up and doing that. One of the things about Akalada was that he was very protective of Parsis. And the morning that my students went to interview him was also the morning that he had just heard a report about a Parsi who had been kidnapped in Quetta. And he was sitting upstairs having breakfast, and he refused to come down. He told me that I don't want them asking me any questions about this, what happened this morning. And I said, no, they're not going to ask you any questions. They just want to listen to you. They want to bask in your glow, and they want to talk about, Parsi contributions to Karachi. He said, okay, but I don't want to talk about Parsis. I said, only about the contributions historically. And I think part of that was about protecting the minority community, because he knew that minorities in Pakistan were in considerable danger, and they are in considerable danger, and the Parsis as a community have been relatively quiet and untouched, and he wanted to maintain that, sustain it. So I think part of his legacy is about a fierce protection of people, and also standing up to the power in a way that was useful and productive, as opposed to simply whining or railing or ranting.
Well, thank you very much, all of you. And I'd like to open it up to the audience. Please identify yourself, and please ask a question, and only one question per person, please. Yes, so there's a person over there in the blue shirt, please. Yes, go ahead.
My name is Ali. I wanted to ask, how do you think Cowasjee contributed to protecting people? Did he at all? Do you think, you said he was very protective of Parsis and minorities, etc. Do you think his work, his efforts paid off in any concrete way?
Yes.
Yes. I think he said that already. Next question, please. Yes, there's somebody in the back right there, please. Right behind you. Right behind you.
My name is Ruxana Jawad, and I'm an ex-civil servant. I'm a retired civil servant. I lived in Karachi for 20 years, which is a long time. And so I have an insight to what Karachi was and what it has turned out to be now, and very ardently followed and read Cowasjee's articles. I think basically he was a man of consciousness. That is why he is what he is. It was not so much as a matter of him being a minority. That was there, of course that was there, no doubt about it. But it was that he...
Hold on, just hold on.
So apart from being the fact that he was a minority, and he very jealously wanted that the minority community should be guarded, and you would find that most of the minority communities were there in Karachi, be they be Parsis, be they be Bohras, or the Khojas, or the Memons. But having said that, all of them put together are a very peaceful lot. They don't want to create any ripples. And it is simply that they are professional, want to go about their business as professionals would like to do. So I personally think he was more a man of consciousness who wanted to arouse that, what was perhaps dormant in most of us, that feeling that we should also rise up and speak against any, so as to speak, an injustice, or so as to speak any wrong which is being done.
Thank you very much. Do you have a question?
All his attributes and everything. Now what? Who is the one who's going to take his place either in Karachi or...
Madam, may I ask your name, please?
My name is Ruxana.
Sanati, it's you. And it's everyone else in this room. The general was not about being a Parsi or defending. You have to understand, this is a man who had lived through history in a very privileged way, who knew personally people that we read about. Personally, state secrets about, you know that Bhutto did this, you know Ayub Khan ek dafa the cutlery ran out, his wife did that. These are the sorts of intimate details. But around this, you had a man who had a very, very fine sense of history,
a man who had a very fine sense of appreciating music, a man who could speak about design, a successful businessman and industrialist, is a complete person. So you can't just be one thing. Ayesha Cowasjee was a complete person, and that made him not a Parsi, or he made him a perfect Pakistani.
Okay, let me ask you then a follow-up to that. I mean, is that generational? I mean, can you be like an Ayesha Cowasjee in today's generation?
I hope so. Why not?
No. Let me finish. Let me be clear. Of course you can in terms of being an active citizen, an engaged citizen. But in terms of the multiplicity of things that he was, could you be that in today's world where things are much more specialized? People are,
But there's a wonderful letter. 14-year-old writes to Justice Learned Hand, who's a Supreme Court judge, says, I want to be a lawyer. Tell me what to do. And Judge Saab writes back to him and says, if you want to be a lawyer, you must read about literature, you must see art, even if it's in a book, you must read poetry. In order to come to the law, you must come to the law a well-read human being. And I would suggest you stop worrying about being a lawyer and start doing that.
And can I add to that? I mean, one of the things that Ayaz talked about his library, but it's truly astonishing if you go to his house and you go upstairs above the sitting room, where there are not very many books. You go up to his bedroom and his study, and there is not really an inch of space because there are books on the floor, books on tables, books on shelves, books. Every surface is covered with books, and they are piled to the ceiling. I'm not joking. And it's and the bed, and and it's impossible. You ask him how he finds anything in that collection of books, and he says, "I know where everything is." But really, this is a man who read consistently all his life and educated himself about subjects that he knew nothing about. Because he was innately curious about them, and he felt that it was his obligation to learn about them. And I think that is part of it. I think that is part of what we've been trying to say, specifically about him. So.
Excellent. We have a question.
Another Cowasjee, and I think that's such an important question. And what I wanted to say was that Rafay, I think, in his talk mentioned his value system, that all he did was stand up for what's good and what's bad. It's if you break it down to the simplicity of that, I think what lacks, I think in general, is the fact that the stance you take to something as simple as this is right and this is wrong. And I think each one of us, if we stand for what is right and what is wrong, we can be him. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can we have
I wanted to explore more on the point that he preferred law and order primarily. And I think that is also a function of him being from Karachi, because he was seeing like what the city was going through. And it is a seductive view that you do want law and order and you want practicality. But practicality has never led to any meaningful change. And this is a man with huge intellectual baggage. And if he is arguing in favor of practicality and law and order over a system that is painful, but that might in the long run lead to something more meaningful, how do you tackle that intellectual baggage? And like there are people in his position less learned than him who are arguing for the same point, that law and order is first and foremost. How do you tackle that in favor, and do you want to make an argument in favor of democracy or not?
I think using the term law and order is misleading. I think what Uncle Ayesha really stood for was the rule of law.
That's right.
Not law and order. Law and order seems to me to suggest martial law and administrators and all of that rubbish, which he was not for. He was for the rule of law, and I think that distinction is very, very important. He was a man who, no matter what the situation was always fighting for the rule of law. So I
My name is Faisal Sultan and I am a student of Master of Communication Sciences. What we discussed here today about Ayesha Cowasjee, he was a wonderful man, has number of positives which we all have discussed here. Would you like to elaborate any negative aspect of his personality which was most irritating? And just one minute, please. And how he managed to control that negative so that it couldn't harm anybody around him.
It wasn't personally irritating
hotel and restaurant owners in Karachi, the general would quite often come and dine and he didn't carry money. But you don't understand, gentlemen don't carry money. If you look at a gentleman's shirt doesn't have a pocket because that's what his valet is for. So he would quite often sign a check on a napkin. ये लोग 5,000 रुपए Ayesha Cowasjee signed और वो waiter को दे. So I remember once we'd gone to pick Ava up from the airport and he was very excited and we wound up going about 2 hours too early to the airport and nothing to do. So we went to have a cup of coffee at the airport hotel around the back. We had our coffee and I didn't have any money and he didn't have any money. So he said, okay, see if they accept a check. So I went to the reception. I said, they didn't accept checks. So abhi masla pad gaya ki they don't have checks. So phir kya kare? At that point, the general had a security detail, a bunch of police behind him. So we went outside and we called all the policemen out and we said, Jebe khali. So we got about 600 rupees out of some policemen. We extorted, something negative. That's it.
Yes, I think just have a retort here from Shahid.
I'm sorry, not a retort, okay. But you mentioned the fact that he never carried any money, and I remember the story. He used to go to Ayaz all the time. Ayaz is a big supermarket in Karachi, and Fareed, who's the owner of Ayaz, is a friend of ours. And he would buy all this stuff, would wheel it out, and go to Fareed and say, Sala, 100 rupiah hai. And Fareed would say, no problem, uncle. 100 rupiah is enough. And then he'd come home and he'd tell Ava, I don't know what's wrong with you people. You go and buy all that stuff, you spend all this money. Look what I bought for 100. And he could send the bill to Ava.
Yes, go ahead. Next one. Can you give him the mic?
It's okay. I'll have a mic.
You speak out.
Yeah, my name is Jalal. I make documentaries. मेरा एक सादा सा सवाल है, just for I'm curious for my own specific reasons. कि कावसजी साहब अपनी रोजमर्रा जिंदगी में उर्दू का ज्यादा इस्तेमाल करते थे या अंग्रेजी
Gujarati का क्या? Is that your? And the last question. We're running out of time, but maybe I might have second last question. Please go ahead. Anybody else? Yes. Yes. In the back. No, we'll take this question first. Over here, please. Over here, there's a lady here. Just let them give you the microphone. Introduce yourself and your question, please, and then we'll go with you.
My name is Athiya Afraz. I teach at LUMS and I'm a columnist also. So my question is a brief to these two gentlemen. Why do you think Cowasjee was not censored as a columnist?
The Dawn people didn't publish a column. I think it may have happened, but then the Friday Times published it.
So what did he have that it made it happen for him? Because this is, I'm speaking from personal experience, so it's an important question for me.
I don't want to answer in relation to...
No, he really came into his own as a columnist after the restoration of the Junaid democracy. So it wasn't during the Zia era, but later. During the Zia era, he was the most indefatigable writer of letters to Dawn. And there would be Cowasjee letters in the letter section, but as a columnist, it was really after 85, the restoration of the Junaid democracy, that he started writing. But once or twice, I mean...
Do you recall what he was censored for? What was the subject?
I don't, but I think sometimes religious or these things, I think.
By and large, feel that the Pakistani press, you can write anything you want. No one reads it.
but Ayesha was read, his column was read. If anything was read in Dawn, it was that column once a week.
I think, it's a testament to the editors at Dawn and to Hamid Haroon, who actually always published. The very few occasions that they didn't were issues that were perhaps, that Ava just said they were about the Supreme Court, that they were perhaps too sensitive at that very moment to publish.
But if he were writing in Urdu, would he have been published is the real question.
He was translated into Urdu and he was published in most of the Urdu newspapers.
And he never was censored. Well, and then that's really quite remarkable. One of our penultimate questions, please, in the back here.
My question already addressed by a lady.
Thank you.
About this.
Then you can sit down. Next person here, please. Yes, go ahead. Do we have the mic here?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
It's not a question, it's just a little memoir. I was sitting at Rafay's house once with his mother, many years ago, before I knew who anybody was. And suddenly the door opened and unannounced, this wizard-like gentleman walked in. He was wearing a very funky hat, he had a silver cane and this cape that I think had stars on it. And he looked around the room and nobody was introduced. And I thought, well, who am I, so keep quiet. And he suddenly said, right, we have to go somewhere. So he sort of scooped us all up and we put us into somebody's car. We went round the back streets and we had tea with an elderly Parsi lady. And I have very long flappy ears that hear everything. So I heard him say at the end, are you financially, are you liquid, are you all right? And she said she was. And I thought, oh, how nice of this man. So as he put us out of the car, I said to him, I have to ask, are you some kind of angel? And he looked at me, said, with a twinkly eye, said, a very wicked one.
Thank you very much for a fascinating panel. All I can say is that citizen Cowasjee, and may there be 101 more in this country.
Hold on for a second.